Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Premier League Betting Show here on the OddsNow YouTube channel. Two familiar faces guiding you through things over the next half an hour. Myself, Matt Hill, joined by my regular co-host, Brad Walker. Well, the dark nights are setting in here in the UK. The clocks have gone back and that means we're fully in towards the winter schedule now. And it does get pretty busy around this time of year, but we do have an international break on the horizon as well. So a little bit of calm before the storm here. The league is rapidly ticking along, isn't it? We've got Europe in the midweeks and Carabao Cup action this week. And just a little caveat before we get too deep into this week's show. We're filming earlier than usual this week. So as I speak on Wednesday, there's still a few Carabao Cup games to be played tonight, which could change things with injuries and what have you. It shouldn't really, but just a little warning for anybody who may be looking to follow these tips. Now, if you're watching the Premier League Betting Show for the first time, or what we're going to do is between me and Brad, we're going to alternate between the games, run you through them, our thoughts on them, and give you a best bet for each one. So hopefully steer you a little bit ahead of the upcoming slate. So Brad, you're going to kick us off. But firstly, how are you doing? How's your week been?
All good, mate. Yeah, looking forward to this one. We had a few winnings last weekend, so hopefully we can continue that again with this one.
We did. We had quite a good week last weekend. You'd think I would have the results in front of me, wouldn't you? But I don't, unfortunately. It's been one of those weeks. But yeah, I will dig those out. I'll put it in the description how we got on last week as well, so you can just scroll down and have a little look. But yeah, we're going to dive straight into things. Saturday lunchtime kickoff gets us up and running this weekend, and it's a good one as well. Newcastle at home to Arsenal. Brad, you're going to take us through this one and your best bet, please.
Yeah, Newcastle's a stuttering start, I think it's fair to say, continued, didn't it, last week with a loss at Chelsea on Sunday. They do play the Blues again in the Cup tonight, as Matt touched upon earlier in the video. We don't know the result of that, of course, but be interesting to see how they fare in that one. They will be at home in that one. Of course, they were at Stamford Bridge last weekend. But now that the defeat in London, does leave them without a win in the last 5 in the Premier League, despite winning 3 of their first 4. So a decent start, but things have really tailed off for Eddie Howe's side. They do only have 1 clean sheet as well across those 9 matches in the Premier League so far, which is, of course, worrying. Many were tipping striker Alexander Isak to be among the Premier League's top scorers this season after a brilliant season last time out for the Magpies. But his poor form and injuries have hampered him. He does only have 2 goals to his name so far, but he did score at Stamford Bridge last time out. So I'm sure it'll be a big boost if they can have him return to form. Anthony Gordon also faces a late fitness test ahead of the game tonight against Chelsea. So it'll be interesting to see if he features there. Or if he features this weekend as well. That is unclear. Like Matt said, we're filming a little bit earlier this week, so we don't know his injury status at the time of recording. They face an injury-stricken, quote-unquote, Arsenal, who are coming off a 2-2 draw with Liverpool last week. They did face, a Liverpool side who were missing key players themselves, but of course it's a bit of a stalemate for 2 of the sides hoping to knock Man City off their perch at the top of the Premier League table, but it's not the worst result for Arsenal. I think it's fair to say. Maybe there's the argument that the draw favours Liverpool more than it does Arsenal, but a draw early on against one of your title rivals is never a bad result with plenty of football still to be played. But I do think there is pressure on them to return to winning ways here, given that a couple of weeks ago they did lose that match at Bournemouth, didn't they? They do trail leaders Manchester City by 5 points already heading into the weekend, and they do too face Preston tonight, by the way, as well in the Carabao Cup. So it'll be interesting to see if they get any more injuries there. I hope they don't, for all of our sake. Otherwise, Arsenal fans on Twitter won't stop mentioning it. Sorry, if they get another name added onto their injury list. We look at Newcastle's recent form before I give up my best bet. 3 of their last 5 have been away from home, but they did lose their last home outing in the Premier League, 1-0 to Brighton. Danny Welbeck, of course, continuing his brilliant form with a goal there. But nevertheless, they do tend to be a different beast at St James's Park. They were unbeaten in 11 league matches there before the Brighton loss. Having said that, though, Arsenal do have a great record at the venue in recent times. They've won 8 of their last 11 meetings against Newcastle up north. And I think the result this weekend, could really hinge on who's available for both. If Gordon is fit, Newcastle really will pose a real threat in front of their own fans. But there are so many unknown factors. I'm not really willing to back either side on the result here. Arsenal are rightly favourites coming in at even money at the time of recording, but we know Newcastle are capable of upsetting anyone, particularly at home on their day. So instead, I'm going to focus on the player shots line. I mentioned Isak scoring versus Chelsea last week. That was his first goal since the start of September. He didn't only score, but he was also heavily involved in Newcastle's recent matches. He had 3 shots versus Chelsea, 2 of which were on target. And he also had 5 shots versus Brighton in that 1-0 defeat, a whopping 4 of which were on target, making it 6 shots in target for Isak in his last 2 appearances in the league. Given the big names missing from the Arsenal backline, Saliba, of course, who's still suspended, Gabriel withdrawn versus Liverpool, Calafiori remains a doubt, along with Jurriën Timber. I think it's fair to say there could be some defensive frailties which could lean in Isak's favour this weekend, and getting him at 11-4 to have over 1.5 shots on target looks an absolute steal to me. So that's where I'll be going. That comes in with Bet365, 11-4, Alexander Isak over 1.5 plus shots on target.
Very nicely summarised, and a very nice best bet for Brad in the early kickoff. I like that one. I've got to say that Arsenal client is looking potentially a bit ragged, but time will tell over the next 24, 48 hours how many of those players may or may not be available to come back in. Now, another game which could have changed a little bit by the time you actually view this. Liverpool taking on Brighton in the first of our 3 o'clocks, and this fixture is actually reversed tonight in the Carabao Cup as Liverpool head to the south coast to take on the Seagulls. But I think it's fair to say that there will be rotation a little bit on both sides. And I wouldn't read too much into that result with regards to this Saturday Premier League fixture. So I'm quite confident talking about this even before the Carabao Cup game has kicked off. Now, Liverpool, as Brad touched on, got a 2-2 draw at Arsenal that I think probably does suit them more than Arsenal. But overall, a little bit early in the context of the season to call it a particularly crucial result. But what it does do is it keeps them 4 points ahead of the Gunners and just a point behind early leaders Manchester City. They have still just suffered that one loss in the league, a shock loss to Nottingham Forest at home. But generally speaking, over the last few years, trying to get Liverpool beat at Anfield is a quick road to the poorhouse. They've been very good on their own turf, arguably the best around, really. And they're still remarkably under Arne Slot. Despite shipping 2 against Arsenal, they've only conceded 5 goals in the Premier League so far this turn in 9 games. And that has contributed to them having, as I speak, the best goal difference in the division. They've got a tough examination coming up here against Brighton, who are enjoying a really good Premier League season. They're 6th after 9 games, which I think Fabian Hersler would have snapped your hand off for when he took over in the summer. They've had some really impressive wins in there as well, beating Manchester United early in the season. And then they've also had victories over Spurs and Newcastle. But for all those good victories, they've had some frustrating draws as well against the likes of Ipswich, Nottingham Forest, and then last week against bottom side Wolves. Again, they really would have been hoping to win. They had a chance to kill it off 3-1 on the break. 4 against 1 they were. And they managed to pick out the one Wolves defender, and then Wolves went up the other end and equalised. So that will feel like 2 points dropped, I'm sure, for Hersler. And if they had won that game, they would have been 4th, actually, joint 4th with Aston Villa. So just shows what a good start they have made. I think they can ask questions of Liverpool here, but I'm not in a rush to back them, even if the price is massive. As I say, I don't generally oppose Liverpool at Anfield in the league. So I've gone down the player props line for this particular clash, and I've landed on a cards bet here. Purvis is Estupiñán, the left back for Brighton. He does have a bit of a penchant for a yellow card, it should be said. He received 9 in all competitions last year, and he's continued that this year. He had a really bad ankle injury last year, the South American, and that was a shame because he was probably Brighton's standout player last season until that injury, and it really did curtail what has been a really promising start to Premier League life. However, he's been eased back into the fray for Brighton this season. Only a handful of starts, 4 starts in all competitions, and in 3 of those starts he has been booked. Now, he does like a tackle, does like to get forward, but I just feel like this is the kind of game where if he's constantly looking to bomb forward, he's got work to do going back the way as well. We know the threats that Liverpool have in wide areas of the pitch, and someone who's been booked in 3 of their 4 starts this season at 11-4 to be booked against a superior Liverpool side, I think this is a cracking bet. So that's the way I'm playing it. Purvis is Estupiñán to be booked 11-4 with Bet365. It's just worth saying as well, he hasn't started every game this season, so you do kind of need to wait for the team news on this one potentially, although if he doesn't start, you'll get a refund. So I would take the 11-4 because I think that is a good price, to be honest. And a good player, someone Fabian Hersler has actually said believes can be the best left back in the Premier League if he stays fit, but I'll be cheering him on to get booked this weekend. Another 3 o'clock coming up next, Ipswich taking on Leicester, 2 of the promoted sides meeting. Brad, how do you see this one going?
Yeah, it's a very intriguing one, Matt. I think they both remain among the favourites to return to the Championship in May. It's not been a great start for any of the promoted sides, has it? But we'll start with Ipswich, the hosts. Their search for a first win in the league since returning to the top flight remains ongoing. They squandered a 2-goal lead at Brentford last time out to eventually lose 4-3. They were crushed, of course, by that last gasp Brian and Wemo strike down in London. That leaves them with just 4 points after 9 matches now. I think it's fair to say for any side battling at that end of the table that your home form is crucial if you're to give yourself any chance of avoiding relegation. And they've not been awful at home so far at Ipswich. Since their loss to Liverpool, at home on the opening day, they followed that up with 2 respectable draws against Fulham and Aston Villa, and then they did lose to Everton 2-0 at home in the last match at Portman Road. But this is a match I'm sure they'll be targeting for 3 points against a fellow relegation rival in Leicester. We'll move on to Steve Cooper's side. They were beaten handily by Nottingham Forest last week, losing 3-1 at the King Power. They did, albeit, maintain their record of scoring in every league outing. Only Man City have done that alongside Leicester so far this season. But it did end their 2-match winning streak, which included, of course, that 3-2 win away at another relegation rival in Southampton, who we'll come on to later on in the show. But the host Ipswich... They host Ipswich in the return fixture on the penultimate weekend of the Premier League. So getting a point here could be a solid result for Steve Cooper's side. I'm sure they'd take a draw if he was off of it. There's less pressure on them to win for sure, I think, given everything that we discussed with the two sides' form so far. We're on match day 10 now. I think we're reaching that point of the season where the Premier League table really starts to paint a clear picture of where each team is at. And it's not an understatement to say that Ipswich are in dire need of a win in this one, not just to get 3 points on the board and to give them that numerical advantage, but also to boost confidence around the club, I think, to convince themselves and offer that reassurance that they can compete in the Premier League. Like I said, we're heading into match day 10 now. We're a quarter of the season. It's passed already remarkably. But it does look a good fixture for Ipswich to do so, given Leicester's loss last week alongside their home advantage. So I am going to back them to come out on top in this one, Ipswich. They've shown positive signs so far this season. There were certainly signs there in that first half against Brentford. And of course, they weren't helped by that red card to Harrison Clark with 20 minutes remaining down in West London. And for all of Leicester's success on the front foot, they have only kept 1 clean sheet so far this season. So coupled with Ipswich's home support, who I'm sure will be right up for this one, I am going to back the hosts to finally get their first win. But I'm also going to go for both teams to score to try and boost that price up a little bit too. Ipswich have conceded in every home fixture. And as I said, Leicester have scored in every Premier League match so far. So I think Ipswich to win with both teams scoring comes in 3-1 generally. It's a very fair price in my eyes for this one.
Yeah, big win that would be for Ipswich as well. That's the way Brad is playing it, thinking the home advantage is going to be key in that bottom of the table clash. Well, the next 3 p.m. kickoff we're going to cover is myself with Bournemouth hosting Manchester City. And Bournemouth have had a good time of things recently, haven't they? They beat Arsenal 2-0 a couple of weeks ago, albeit benefiting from that red card for William Saliba, but you still have to go and finish the job. And I thought they took control of that game really well and got the job done. They followed that up with a last-minute equaliser at Villa Park last weekend, and that's a great result for any team, I think, this season to go to Villa and get something. 90+6, Evan Nielsen popping up with that equaliser. But this will be a tough task for them, won't it, against a Manchester City side who probably not playing anywhere near 10 out of 10 at the moment, but they're still on a 5-match winning run in all competitions, and albeit I'm talking before their cup clash with Tottenham tonight. They're on a great unbeaten run. They are top of the league, yet to taste defeat in the Premier League. And it feels like there's all this talk about Arsenal and Liverpool challenging for the title and having a real chance. But ultimately, I do think we are sometimes guilty of just overlooking how much of a ruthless machine this Manchester City side are under Pep Guardiola. And let's not forget, this is a team that traditionally makes slow starts, and they are top of the league after 9 games, having not tasted defeat yet. So if this is a slow start, I wouldn't like to see how they finish. That said, there are some frailties there in this City side at times. They have conceded more goals than we are used to seeing them concede. However, and I repeat, I'm talking before their cup clash with Tottenham, clean sheet against Southampton last weekend, clean sheet against Sparta Prague in the Champions League prior to that, and they conceded against Wolves in a 2-1 victory, but that was only one of Wolves' 2 shots on target in that match. So they're not really giving up too many chances to the opposition. In fact, over the last 5 games, there's been less than 10 shots on target against City. So I actually think they're playing a little bit better than they're getting credit for at the moment. Bournemouth, understandably, have been well back to sort of get a goal in this game. I was surprised, actually, to see both teams to score a skinny odds on, even shorter than 8-11 in some places. Now, Man City's head-to-head record against Bournemouth, particularly in the last 2 seasons, which I think is the kind of relevant data, they've kept them at arm's length. They won this fixture 1-0 last season. They've dished out a few beatings as well, scoring 6 and 4 against them. And I do just sometimes think that City are well suited to playing these possession-orientated sides like a Bournemouth, like a Southampton last week. Let's be honest, Pep Guardiola was full of praise for Russell Martin after that game. But I did kind of preempt this on the Premier League betting show last week, that he would come out with praise for Martin because, yes, they play a nice possession style of football similar to Guardiola, but they just don't have the same caliber of players, and that suits Man City down to a T, really, doesn't it? So I think they will actually get a comfortable win over Bournemouth here. I think if Bournemouth are to get anything in this game, it'll be through frustrating City with a rearguard effort. So rather than backing City to win 0, which I very nearly did, I'm just going to back both teams to score no, which chunky 13-10 at Betfair, and obviously that covers the City win 0, but also gives you the option of the goalless draw. And if Bournemouth, I suppose it covers a Bournemouth win 0 as well, but I won't be banking on that one. Back across to Brad for Southampton versus Everton.
Yeah, I discussed the other 2 promoted sides in the last match I covered. Now we move on to the other one in Southampton, who of course are another of the main candidates for relegation, and they've been dismal. I think it's fair to say so far in the Premier League this season. Like Ipswich, they're yet to record a single win, and they've lost their last 4 on the spin. Though they did show some real grit in that loss to Manchester City, as Matt talked through there. And I think you mentioned the praise of Pep Guardiola had for the side. I think Bernardo Silva also had a few positive comments around them, saying that they deserve a lot more points than they've got this season. But regardless of that, the league table doesn't lie, and they still do only have 1 from 9 matches. And it's a run of form which simply can't continue if they're to stand any chance of survival this season. Meanwhile, Everton have really picked up after an equally difficult start. They're unbeaten their last 5 now, 2 of which ended in victory. That included their last away outing, which was a 2-0 win at Ipswich. And they also salvaged a point last week with a late equaliser at home to Fulham in an eventual 1-1 draw. Sean Dyche's side, have already faced the other 2 promoted sides away from home. They impressed in both. I think they led for large portions against Leicester before conceding in the final quarter to draw 1-1. And then I mentioned that victory at Ipswich as well, which took place earlier this month. Southampton have arguably been the worst of the 3 sides that have came up so far. I think it's fair to say, particularly in terms of the results anyway. And you can say what you want about the performances, but in terms of the results, they just haven't been there. They've got 1 point, as I said, after 9. And a lot has been made, I think, of their poor performance from attacking and defending set pieces. I think they're one of the 8 clubs without a set piece specialist, which seems to be the trend nowadays. You see it every weekend almost now, a manager running to his set piece coach if something pulls off from a corner or a free kick. And then you think of the nature of a Sean Dyche side, of physical, bullish nature, and real strength from set pieces last season. I've just got a feeling that they could bully and out-hustle Southampton here to make it 6 matches unbeaten in the Premier League. So you can probably guess where I'm going. I'm going to go for an Everton win at 17-10. That comes in generally across the board, and there's plenty of value there. I just think the Toffees will compound Southampton's woes, and the hosts' search for a first win will remain ongoing, beyond this weekend.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from there. It does make me laugh when these players come out and say this team deserves more, deserves this, deserves that. Look, it doesn't matter how you play; it's how many points you get at the end of the day, isn't it? And no style of play deserves any more points than another style of play. If it's effective, then it'll get results, won't it? So that is ultimately what we're seeing with Southampton, I think. But anyway, moving on. The final 3 p.m. of this weekend is Nottingham Forest versus West Ham. And Forest, I think they'd be delighted with their start to the season, won't they? All the way up in 7th now, the dizzy heights. They've only lost 1 game. I suppose draws have frustrated them a little bit in this period, but they've had some good draws as well. A good draw away at Chelsea, a good draw away at Brighton, of course, that amazing win at Anfield. So generally speaking, it's really hard to pick fault in this Nottingham Forest Forest side. The goals are flowing. They're not shipping many. It's literally everything you would want to see from a Forest perspective. And they probably feel like they've left some points out there as well. Similar to what I said with Brighton, mustn't grumble at where they are, but could have been even better off. But all told, this is a Forest side we've been used to seeing getting sucked into the relegation mire. So I think to be seventh after effectively a quarter of the season is a fantastic outcome for them. West Ham, on the other hand, well, they've found things tough going under Julian Lopetegui. A much-needed win against Manchester United last week, and that was ultimately a result that cost Erik ten Hag his job. It was a 92nd minute penalty from Jared Bowen that got him the win. You could actually say that United were marginally the better team in that one, despite what led. But I think ten Hag's departure, as we'll probably touch on later in the show, was very much something on the cards. I don't think it was just all about last week, was it? But for West Ham, yeah, a good result, but I still wonder a little bit about their underlying performances. They haven't convinced me away from home under Lopetegui. They've got that win on opening day at Crystal Palace, but even that result hasn't aged that well because Palace generally have struggled this season thus far, bar last weekend. So, not convinced with West Ham away from home here, and I think this is a tough trip for them. It's one that at the start of the season, Hammers fans would have penciled down as a winnable away trip. I think now they'd probably take a draw, to be honest. But Forest have been extremely well backed in the early markets, and they continue to be backed. West Ham are drifting, and I suppose they could drift out to a backable price for those who maybe don't see a big gap between these two teams in terms of quality. But I'm going to go with the form book here. And instead of backing Forest to win, I'm going to take what I think is a huge price about Chris Wood as the first goal scorer, 6-1 at 888 Sport. This is, and he's a general, a sort of 5-1, 11-2 chance. I'd have had him a couple of points shorter than 6-1, to be honest. I think the form he's in, only Erling Haaland and Brian Mbeumo have scored more than the Kiwi this season. He has 7 goals in the Premier League. He continued that stunning scoring form last time out, didn't he, against Leicester with a brace? And he could have had more in that game as well. In fact, at half time, the analysis was all centered around how he hadn't managed to score, came out after the break and scored twice. And he just keeps getting himself the opportunities, doesn't he? And that is the mark of a striker in form. Forest are playing exactly how he would want them to play, getting balls in the box to him. And when someone like this gets on a run of confidence and a run of goal scoring, he's a very streaky player. He's been a streaky player all the way through his career. I remember at Burnley him going on great scoring runs as well. Very capable, a real handful. And for a West Ham defence that has looked extremely shaky, he lost 4-1 at Spurs in their last away game. A real lack of clean sheets for the Hammers this season. I think Wood can take advantage. I'm amazed that he's 6-1. And there's a bit of 2-1 any time as well if you want to play it safer. But I just think that 6-1 too big to ignore. So that's my bet for that one. Chris Wood, first goal scorer for Nottingham Forest against West Ham, 6-1. Brad, the late kickoff sees struggling Wolves, who got a big point, it should be said, against Brighton, against Crystal Palace side, who have also been struggling, but also got a big result last weekend.
Yeah, you mentioned Wolves there, Matt. I think there have been some positive signs in recent weeks, haven't there? They were bitterly unlucky, not to get something from the Man City 2-1 defeat 2 weeks ago. Of course, a late winner from John Stones salvaged all 3 points there for the reigning champions. And then Wolves did return by battling to a hard-earned 2-2 draw versus Brighton. Matthias Cunha salvaging a point himself with a 96th-minute equaliser after Wolves found themselves 2-0 down with 2 minutes remaining. So you've got to credit them there. Lots of questions surrounding the future of Gary O'Neill, but his side did show a lot of character to leave with something there under those circumstances. You mentioned there as well, Palace, they'll be buoyant after last week. They picked up their first win in the season of a 1-0 victory over Tottenham at Selhurst Park. A difficult start, as you said, but they're still left, on 6 points after 9 matches. But I'm sure both sides will be fancying their chances of getting points in this one, given the respective starts that both sides have made. But I do fancy Wolves in this one. I think there's far too much quality in that side to be where they are, to be honest with you. I know that the departures in the summer didn't help. You can't keep harping on about that now. We're nearly in November. But I have felt for Gary O'Neill in recent weeks, and there have been signs of improvement, particularly at home. They led for large portions against Newcastle before the last international break, I think it was, but they eventually lost 2-1 there. I felt as though they let Liverpool off the hook when they visited a couple of weeks ago too. And then, as I said, came so close to getting something against Man City. So coupled with Palace's poor away record, I don't think they've won any of their 4 away matches this season in the Premier League. I'm going to back Wolves to win here and pick up 3 much-needed points. That comes in at 7-4 generally, but those odds are shortening at the time of recording, so it's better to jump on now. I think it's fair to say to get the best or biggest price possible for that one. So a Wolves win 7-4 generally across the board.
Wolves to get an all-important win, and I think they have been knocking on the door. We've touched on it, Brad, haven't we, the last couple of weeks? They look like a team that's about to maybe click, a little bit like Everton did a few weeks ago, and they've done so subsequently as well, as you referenced. But anyway, on to Sunday. We have 3 games on Sunday, the first of which is Tottenham versus Aston Villa. 2 games on Sunday and a Monday night game, I should say. Tottenham versus Aston Villa to start things off on Sunday. This is a great game on paper as well. 2 teams who would have came into this season with similar aspirations, but I think it's fair to say that Villa have made the more promising start than Spurs. And just touching on Villa, all this talk about Arsenal as well this season, they're level on points with Aston Villa after 9 games. So maybe Villa just being a little bit underappreciated, and that shouldn't be happening really when you consider the season that they had last year, getting into the Champions League, sealing that 4th place spot, and they've shown that it was no flash in the pan, haven't they, under Unai Emery. They've also made an outstanding start to their first Champions League campaign in many years as well. So good times at Aston Villa, albeit they were frustrated with a late equaliser by Bournemouth last weekend, a late equaliser that if they hadn't conceded would have put them outright third and just 3 points behind leaders Manchester City. So that just gives you some context of how well Villa are playing at the moment. They go to Tottenham, a Tottenham side who have struggled for consistency, I think it's fair to say. When they're on it, Tottenham, they look very good, but they're just having a few too many off days at the moment, aren't they? And that was another one at the weekend against Crystal Palace. Now, it was a difficult fixture for them because this is a Palace side who the pressure has been mounting on Oliver Glasner to get that first victory and to break that rut that they were on. And they managed to do so against Spurs. But I just feel like Spurs have too many flat games, too many games where they don't get anywhere near the standards that they can set. And that will be frustrating, Ange Postecoglou, given the money that they have spent and the players that they have brought in. So all things considered, when I look at this game, Aston Villa were a tempting bet. However, Tottenham are generally very good at home. So instead, I thought I would just play goals. I just look at this fixture, it just screams goals to me. Everything historically points to goals. Everything in terms of the 2 teams being prolific this season points to goals. And I think both are vulnerable in defence. Villa less so, but the fact they're away from home against a Tottenham side that have a lot of attacking quality, I'm happy to back the goals here. Over 3.5 goals is 6-5. Now, that is quite an aggressive line, but I think that's with good reason. I really do see this being an entertaining affair, and I'm happy to keep it simple and play that at an odds against 6-5. Currently available with BetMGM, over 3.5 goals. The bet for me. Super Sunday is Manchester United versus Chelsea. Brad, talk us through this one.
Yeah, finally, we won't have to kick off our Man United preview with an Eric Ten Hag update. He has gone now, as Matt touched upon. He was sacked on Monday following a string of poor performance over the last 12 to 18 months, to be honest with you. It's left United 14th in the table. Ruud van Nistelrooy will oversee this game at the time of writing, at least, though the strong links with Ruben Amorim continue at the time of recording, sorry, not the time of writing. But those links to Ruben Amorim, of course, the Sporting Lisbon boss, do continue as we film this. I think describing United's start as poor would be a slight understatement. They've only won 1 of the last 5 in the league and most recently suffered that 2-1 defeat at West Ham, as Matt touched upon a moment ago. They missed a host of chances in that first half, could easily have been 3, 4 or 5 up. But the controversial penalty aside, it did feel as though heading into that game that only a win would save Eric Ten Hag's job, or at least delay his sacking for another week. His fate was, though, confirmed by that late Jarrett Bowen strike from the spot. I also thought, to be honest, you would be discussing the future of Chelsea boss Enzo Maresca by this stage of the season. I had him among the contenders to be the first man sacked in the summer, but he's been brilliant so far, as have his Chelsea side. The 2-1 win over Newcastle last weekend leaves them 5th now. They also gave a good account of themselves at Anfield a couple of weeks ago. He's handled the high number of players in that Chelsea squad well, and to be fair to Maresca, and could this be the best time to play United, or the worst, with that potential for a new manager bounce? It's a good time for a police car to drive past my house, if you can hear that. But yeah, not sure on the result, so I'm going to stay away from that in terms of picking a winner. I wouldn't be surprised by either side or a draw, to be honest with you, given everything I've just discussed. But one thing I am confident of, is one man being at the centre of any drama, and that's Cole Palmer. He had an incredible first season for Chelsea last term, and he's been equally as impressive. And this time around, I think it's fair to say he already has 7 goals and 5 assists in 9 appearances in the league this season. Just astonishing numbers. He picked out an incredible pass, didn't he, in the build-up to Chelsea's first goal versus Newcastle last week, before netting the winner himself at Stamford Bridge and getting him at an odds against 8-5 to score any time. Looks very fair against a very, very poor Man United side who have been conceding goals and chances left, right, and centre. Those odds are shortening again, so it'd probably be better to jump on sooner rather than later to get the best price possible. But Cole Palmer to score any time looks a no-brainer for me, 8-5 with Bet365.
Yeah, Cole Palmer, he certainly is a man in form. Well, I say form. He's been playing that way for so long now. I don't think you can call it a purple patch. Maybe, like we talked about Chris Wood, that is a run of form, isn't it? Whereas Cole Palmer's just showing his class, isn't he? And he really is a top quality operator. Well, we have a Monday night game to round things off this weekend. Fulham taking on Brentford in West London derby, testing my knowledge there of London. Actually, I'm questioning Brentford being in West London, but there we go. Yeah. It's definitely a London derby. Well, I know that much. So, yeah, these are two teams that I think will be fairly happy with their start to the season, particularly Brentford, who sit in the top half. Performances have been entertaining, haven't they, for the neutral? There always seems to be loads of goals in Brentford's games this season. 4-3 win, a 5-3 win, especially at home. They don't mind going toe-to-toe with teams. And I think as a neutral, you just can't help but warm to that. But I do think they're a little bit of a different beast away from home. We don't always see the best of Brentford on their travels. Lost 2-1 to, as we described, a pretty poor Man United team. They also lost 3-1 at Brentford, 2-1 at City, and 2-0 at Liverpool. Now, those are 4 tough away games to start, so maybe we shouldn't judge them entirely on those results. However, Fulham are pretty good on their own patch as well, aren't they? And when they've been firing, they've been really impressive at times this season. I think the standout performer for them has been Emile Smith-Rowe, who switched from Arsenal and has hit the ground running. Now, they had a difficult draw at Everton last time out, but we talked about Everton being on an upward curve as well. So I don't think that result was potentially as disappointing as it looks. I think all things considered, Fulham are in a good place. Brentford are in a good place. I expect this to be an entertaining game, but when I'm coming towards finding a bet, I just keep finding myself going back to Brentford's away form. And this isn't just this season, that's last season as well. They're always a team that does really well at home and struggles away from home. And as a result, I'm going to keep things simple here. I think backing Fulham to win with both teams to score looks like an attractive bet for this Monday night game. There is north of 5-2 available currently with William Hill, 13-5 or 2.6 if you're dealing decimals. I think that's a fair price. I think it'll go off a little bit shorter, to be honest, because Fulham are going to be just about odds on to win this game, but Brentford's attacking talent is so good. I don't see them being kept out for the 90 minutes, but I will just edge with the home side there. So it's Fulham to win and both teams scored 13-5. That rounds off our games. We're going to run through our best bets now, bring them up onto the screen for you. Brad, we'll start with yours. Alexander Isak over 1.5 shots on target as his Arsenal 11-4. Ipswich to beat Leicester with both teams to score is 3-1 across the board. And then you've gone for straight wins for Everton against Southampton at 17-10 and Wolves against Crystal Palace at 7-4. And then that Cole Palmer anytime selection 8-5. Which would be your favourite bet of those, Brad?
Probably the Isak one. I think that looks a no-brainer given Arsenal's injury problems at the back. I know he's not been amazing this season, Isak, but yeah, that'd be where I'd be placing my money out of those 5, I think, if I had to pick one.
Seem a big price, doesn't it? 11-4 against a disjointed back line. Well, my best bet, Purvis is stooping on to be booked against Liverpool 11-4. I really do like that one if he starts. Bournemouth City, both teams to score no, is an odds against 13-10. Chris Wood, first goal scorer, 6-1 against West Ham, just feels way too big for me. Tottenham Villa over 3.5 goals is 6-5, and Fulham to win with both teams scoring 13-5. My best bet, I'll go all out with the big price. Chris Wood, first goal scorer. I think he's a man in form. Nothing wrong with jumping on a bandwagon when it is a streaky striker, and I don't have any faith in that West Ham defence to keep him quiet either. So that's where my best bet is. Well, I hope you enjoyed the Premier League betting show. If you don't already, please do consider subscribing to OddsNow. We'd love to have you around. We have regular sports betting content going up on the channel. We're up towards 350 subscribers now, so really pleased with how we are growing. We'd love to have you on board. Please give us us a thumb up as well if you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you again very soon.